Bob Nightengale visited Mike Shildt in Phoenix to write a story for USA Today. Mike Shildt is, working for the Padres. He's been a coach this spring training. And talked about his firing from the Cardinals. And I tell you, man, a lot of these quotes are really he's pretty morose even now. I mean, he's not over it. And I'm not saying anything flippant about that. I mean, these are genuine emotions. I mean, the only thing I, challenge or a little bit is that, and I talked about this earlier, and we can get into this again, but not right this second. But the only thing I would contest a bit is like he really seems, he's really selling this idea, trying to sell this idea that it's like he really still has no idea why the change was made. And I think really he probably knows why. Maybe he just didn't think it was as serious as John Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt did. That's all. But anyway, let me just read you some of these quotes. And I know a lot of you probably read the story, so I apologize for just, telling you what you already know. But I know a lot of people didn't know about the story until a little later today. I was one of them, actually, because I was doing some other things. But he told Bob Nightengale, a friend of the show, friend in life, quote, "I have a broken heart. It still hurts. It hurts bad. When it first happened, I broke down. I was inconsolable. I got better as time went on. Then I got down here, put on the Padres uniform, and it hit me. And now it just hit me again." He said, "I love that organization, gave it everything I had for 18 years. We make the playoffs after they hadn't been there for 3 years. We get back to the standards of the Cardinals. We're set up to really go, the clean style of play, the culture, everything is in place. And then you get removed from it." He later added, "It feels like it was stolen away from me." These are pretty dramatic quotes. I mean, I'm walking a fine line here because I feel for the guy in that respect, man. If we've ever had a job that we liked or a situation we're in that we're liked and then it's over, I mean, it is a jolt, and sometimes it can absolutely leave you pierced, and it's not as easy to close that hole. And, my friend John Clayton passed away recently, and my other friend Mike Sando wrote in The Athletic that when John Clayton got fired by ESPN because it was like his dream job and he just loved every minute of it, Mike Sando said, John never really got over it. It just like affected him for the rest of his life. He was always really down about it. So I don't in any way, make fun of that kind of thing or take the approach of like, oh, get over it. No, not at all. Not at all. But I'm saying is that I'm just like kind of like, whoa, because it's the quotes are so strong and so dramatic. And I hope he gets over it because he's going to have a chance to manage again. I think he did a good job here, certainly, enough to warrant a second opportunity for sure. He's got a lot of people around the game that respect him, and maybe that's what it'll take. Maybe that's it. What it will take is him getting another managerial job, and he will. He talked about that day when he got word on the phone from Mo. And, again, you got all these people, just I remember at the time, media people said, well, they didn't even have the decency to go see him in person. Well, number one, pandemic. Number two, travel problems. Number three, one party was in St. Louis, one was in North Carolina. So relax. It's just not that big of a deal. I mean, for 2 or 3 years, the country's been doing everything by Zoom, okay? But Shildt recalled the day, that morning, quote, "I was getting on the phone with the thought it was going to be about a contract extension. I had 1 more year left on my contract, so I was looking at some of the numbers of the last 3 years. I was feeling good about them, and then Mo started talking." According to Shildt, Mo opened the call by saying, Mike, this conversation isn't going to go the way you think it's going to go." That's chilling. I mean, that's chilling, I kind of went through that experience not all that long ago myself. It's like, well, why am I getting this call now? And it's just like, then I could tell a friend of mine who's running the radio station, still a friend of mine, I could tell by his voice immediately, oh, this isn't good. And I can smile about it now because I love where I work. Shildt said the conversation lasted 4, maybe 5 minutes. He said he was like in a state of shock, so he can't even remember exactly what was said. It was, according to Bob Nightengale, everything was a blur. His body went limp. His mind went numb. And he was just sort of knocked on his butt, metaphorically speaking. And he said, quote, Shildt said, "I never thought it was a possibility. It hit me like a ton of bricks." I'm just going down in order here. So Nightengale talked to Craig Counsell, the Brewers manager, who said, quote, "I was shocked, completely shocked. That's the way I can say it. I don't even know what happened. Maybe he doesn't either. I mean, what they did in September, there's got to be some credit given along the way." According to Nightengale, Shildt got text messages and calls right away from Yadier Molina, Paul Goldschmidt, Adam Wainwright, other managers. So he has had plenty of support. And then Bob Nightengale said a few days ago there was an impromptu meeting behind home plate for a spring training game. Shildt and Hall of Fame manager Tony Larussa. Now Larussa's kind of declaring war. He likes all this kind of stuff. Larussa said that he heard a comment from someone in the Cardinals organization that Shildt was fired because of, quote, a toxic environment. And Larussa said, this is a direct quote, "That one frosted my ass. My comment was that if it was toxic, it must be in the front office. I'm for the Cardinals. Everybody makes their own decision. But when you start talking about that, it might damage his chance to manage again for those that don't know any better. He did a hell of a job. Philosophical differences, okay. But toxic, he's a special guy. That's why it's so important for his reputation to be intact and not smeared." Nightengale reached out to Mozeliak, who, when contacted, declined to publicly revisit the reasons for the firing. He simply reiterated that there was philosophical difference, and he said that Shildt's record and success as a manager was inconsequential in the decision, which actually checks out. No one in a high position of authority, no one that had anything to do with this directly has ever revealed to media, off the record or otherwise, the exact nature of these philosophical discussions. So DeWitt, Mo, Gersh, the people on that level, none of them are trying to smear Mike Shildt. They just, in fact, they've taken hits for just not revealing more than they have, because they're figuring, look, it doesn't do him any good if everybody starts lobbing grenades here, and we're besmirching him, and maybe it causes some problems for him, and we don't want to do that because these things happen in life. There are philosophical differences all the time. See, I know we all want the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing. That's our culture. I get that. We got to have a national vetting of this, and everyone needs to know every detail down to what Mike Shildt had for breakfast. And one time in a meeting, John Mozeliak gave Mike Shildt, he rolled his eyes, and their relationship was never the same, and all this garbage. The Cardinals have not played the game, and they get beat up for it. And I understand that, but the irony of Larussa going off like that is actually the Cardinals and the people who actually fired him have protected him by not speaking about it and not revealing stuff that could be taken the wrong way or could reflect poorly on Shildt. They just don't see any point to it. And as much as I'd like to know more, I don't blame the Cardinals for, sort of taking the path of what, it's happened. We got a manager. Mike's got a job. He'll manage again. What's the point of throwing mud at each other right now? So, and I know probably 95% people listening disagree with me, and that's okay too. Shildt would not go into public details either, but he acknowledged, according to Bob Nightengale, that he didn't share the same views with Mozeliak on some components of the organization. But Shildt did not think it was nearly enough to provoke a firing. He said, quote, "I thought I was going to die in my Cardinals uniform. That's why it still hurts so much." And, again, kind of dramatic there. He said, "I was so loyal to that organization. I cared so much. I felt an immense weight of being a caretaker. Ultimately, I put too much pressure on myself. That was my issue, not anybody else's. I didn't want to let Mo down. I didn't want to let my team down. I didn't want to let our fan base down. I didn't want to let the tradition of players that came before us down. I was very passionate about that and dedicated to it, and at some level I probably cared too much. There were some things that I just felt could be better, and I thought I was in a safe place to share them. Clearly, I wasn't. Now, I'm sure that, with all due respect to Mike Shildt, that there are some certain things that I do know for 100% certainty, and one of them is that, this was an ongoing thing last season. So people will read that quote and say, oh, see, you're not allowed to disagree with Mo. Actually, you are. But when it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, I could see why a president of baseball operation would conclude it's like, this guy thinks he's sort of in charge. And, we have some serious disagreements on how the baseball team should be run as far as like tactics, new philosophies on bullpen, pitching, platoons, matchups, maybe doing things in an unconventional way. We thought Shildt was going to be that guy, and he really wasn't, and he was sort of going back more old school. And so this wasn't like they had one meeting and they disagreed on some stuff. I mean, my goodness, this was an ongoing thing. And it really, there was a lot going on behind the scenes last season. So if you come to, when something goes on for months, and probably even a little bit, well, maybe not during the pandemic year, but let's concentrate on 2021. When things go on during the season, and you reach the end of the season, and you still cannot come to an agreement on how things will be. Well, again, it's like Walt Jocketty getting fired back in the day by Bill DeWitt, 2007 in October, year after winning the World Series. He couldn't accept Jeff Luhnow. He hated it. He bristled under it. He pushed back all the time. Bill DeWitt tried to talk to him, concluded that there's really no point in this anymore because Walt's just not going to back off, and he's just going to keep – it's just the dissension is just going to keep rising, and we just can't operate like this. And he fired him. So – as I was saying earlier, to me, the naivete of people just don't even understand the way DeWitt and Mosaic do things. They fired a lot of people. You don't have to like it. We can disagree with it. We can say it's harsh. We can say it's unfair. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the fact that nobody should be shocked that they fired Mike Shildt because of philosophical difference, because that's exactly what they did with Walt Jocketty, who won a World Series and put together pennant winners and drafted Albert Pujols. So I'm just shocked. Why would you be shocked? Go back and look at the history. They fired Matheny, who in terms of wins and losses did really, really well. He started to lose it a little bit towards the end, and that includes the clubhouse, but I don't think they had much of a choice back then. They even, in effect, demoted Jeff Luhnow over, he still had considerable power, but there was a point in time they changed his title, and he didn't have quite as much juice. And they knew he was bound to become a general manager anyway. They didn't do anything to hurt him, but I think they sensed that he would be leaving relatively soon, which was true. And so they kind of reconfigured his job, and Luhnow was okay with it. I mean, probably not 100% thrilled. They made the decision not to match the Pujols offer that Anaheim made him. I mean, the exact offer. They make tough decisions. They make decisions that leave people like going, wow. So the Shildt thing, A, fit into that pattern, and B, is very similar in that the person who ended up getting fired in each one of these cases, just over a rather long period of time, just wouldn't agree to go along with what the rest of the organization, management, baseball operations felt. Managers are not in charge. They don't run the company. They don't run the baseball company. And general managers the same way. So if you believe like, well, I'm going to tell them how it's going to be. I made the playoffs 3 years in a row. I won the manager of the year, and I tell you what, this is how it's got to be. I'm going to tell them. It doesn't work that way. Sorry. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way in any business that I'm aware of. And if you have discussions and they go nowhere, and the president of baseball operation, the owner on one side, and they're in that corner, managers in this corner, well, what do you think is going to happen? What Mike Shildt going to line up an investment group, try to buy the team? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, are we all stupid? I mean, come on now. Ain't going to win that fight. So why? You can push, but to a point, it's like, well, is their team, they run it, let's go. Let's just go. That didn't happen. And there were problems also within. And I found that one quote really, really interesting, where Mike Shildt said, ultimately, I put too much pressure on myself. That was my issue, not anybody else's. I didn't want to let Mo down, team down, fans down. I didn't want the traditional players, didn't want to let them down, the players that came before us. I was very passionate about that. I probably cared too much. And I think there's a million things in there based on what I know, which is what I've said, many times on this show, said it at Scoops with Danny Mac, wrote it, I should say. There was some conflict with him and the coaches. And everyone assumes it's a Jeff Albert thing. It wasn't just a Jeff Albert thing, because a lot of the coaches just were surprised by some of the things that was going on, with Mike just kind of snapping and berating people in front of others and, things like that. And so maybe the pressure did get to him. By the way, because he does that, doesn't make him a bad guy. That doesn't mean that it's like, oh, he's got to go, period. But it was just sort of out of character, and it indicated an overall tension that was starting to eat away at everything. And that's why, ultimately, I think Mo and DeWitt made their decision they did. Once again, I'm trying to explain it. I'm not endorsing it. I am endorsing it to the point of it's ridiculous to think that you can tell your bosses no, 50 times during a season, and then after the season, and then somehow they're going to say, oh, okay, we'll do it your way. That's fine. Doesn't work that way. So in that respect, I'm endorsing the idea of I understand the way these things work. And a manager can, I don't care who he is. I mean, maybe Tony Larussa could do it, but I got some stuff to add on that too. A manager can't overplay his hand, and I don't care what organization we're talking about. You just can't do it. You just cannot do it. Tony Larussa, and I was privy to a lot of things. I mean, Tony Larussa would push like hell. He wants to trade for this guy. He wants that guy. You got to do this. You got to do that. And what Tony Larussa would always tell me, he didn't get his way all the time. In fact, a lot of times he didn't. But what Larussa said, and this applies, in my opinion, to the Shildt scenario. Larussa said, but I always knew when it was time to stop pushing. Look, they're in charge. Bill owns the team. Walt and then Mo, they're the head of the baseball operation. And you make your case and you make your push, and you try to lay out the case why they should do something. At the end of the day, they say, no, we're just not going to do that. You got to move on. So some of you who would think like, oh, he got fired for saying no to Mo. No, it really wasn't what happened. Because, again, this was an ongoing thing that lasted a pretty long time. As TLR said, you push. End of the day, they're in charge. You move on and then save it for the next time you want something. And Larussa was able to, a lot of times, get what he wanted. You know why? Because he wasn't a baby. He would make his pitch for some move or some trade. He'd get a little fired up about it, but then when he realized it wasn't going to happen and he's not the boss, he moved on. And then maybe 2 weeks later, he's pushing for something else, and, they say yes. That's how it works. That's how it works. Not anything revolutionary here. So, moving on here, Shildt also endorsed Ali Marmol. Ali Marmol, the youngest manager in baseball, 35 years old, and I'm really curious to see how Ali's going to do this year and some of the stuff he's got up his sleeve. Shildt says, quote, he's a sharp guy. He's ready for it. I'll be pulling for him and for all those guys. I'll never stop pulling for the Cardinals. They're the ones who gave me this opportunity in the first place. They're the ones that took a chance on me, and I'll always be grateful for that. And that is, I'm glad he said that, because there's a lot of truth in that too. I mean, I don't think that this is incorrect in any way for me to say that without John Mozeliak, Mike Shildt would have never gotten an opportunity in pro baseball. I mean, there was a group of one. His name was Mozeliak, that saw something in Shildt and asked him to come to work for the Cardinals. And it was also a guy named Mozeliak who, at every turn, promoted Shildt up the ladder, up the ladder, up the ladder, up the ladder, until he became the manager. So the idea, that this is some like good versus evil thing, come on, man. Mozeliak was, for the longest time, Shilt's biggest fan and biggest supporter, and that's why he made him manager of the Cardinals. But when you cannot agree on certain baseball philosophies and it becomes contentious and it's not going to go away, the boss wins. And why this should come as some kind of revelation to people, I frankly have no idea. Shildt said, in closing, I just never thought I would not be a Cardinal. It left me shattered, but time heals to some degree. It's just that I love those guys with all my heart, and it hurts knowing I can't be with them. So Nightengale did a hell of a job. Shildt really opened up and put raw emotion on display. It was dramatic. Some of it was painful to read because you can tell he's hurting. But it also, I can't come around to the idea it's like he was a victim. No, it's baseball. It's sports. Good coaches in the NFL lose their job. I mean, people get demoted. People are fired. It's not a victimhood thing. That's all. That would be my only piece of dissent, and also just the fact that people seem to think that this was something just like crazy and nothing like this has ever happened. I mean, come on now. I mean, Walt Jocketty wasn't fired all that long ago, was he? Year after winning a World Series? Man, it was cold-blooded, man. BDJ got in his car and drove out to Ladue or wherever, and it's just like, bam. And Walt was, I talked to Walt right after that happened, and Walt was just, the stuff like Shildt said, Walt was just floored. He couldn't believe it, So you get caught up in moments, you say things, you push too hard, you don't stop, you don't let up, you sort of forget who's in charge and that there's a limit to how much they'll take. And, you got to be careful about maybe getting too big for your own britches, as to use that old expression. Anyway, Jim, I'm done talking now.
No, as you're describing this, it just kind of reminded me of a personal situation.
Yeah, right?
I think
we've all been there, right?
Yeah, at one point, younger days, time ago, it was like, hey, it was like throwing out there, hey, the boss doesn't really like the way that's going. And you're like, it'll be fine. He just doesn't get it. He don't understand what we're doing here. He's and then eventually that thing that we were trying to accomplish went away. It was like, oh, okay, he is the boss. Okay, yeah, we'll do it your way. And then, as you said, in time, you learn, okay, I can push this way or that way and get things done that you want to do. I think we've all been there at some point, whatever your profession is. And you bring up the Jocketty thing, and it is so true. I remember because I was around the team and running the network at the time. So we had to do the press conference for the hiring for John Mozeliak and the firing of Walt. And I remember those that were around the organization says, oh, my God, I cannot believe this. This is terrible. How can they fire this guy? They just won the World Series a year ago. Well, take a look at history, people. It's almost the exact same thing. Now, he didn't win a World Series, but he had some really good seasons, the manager, Mike Shildt. Yeah. You just got to realize there are times when you can't. And you just got to go, okay, live to fight another day. So it's just, it was a shocker, I admit. I was like, whoa, didn't see that coming. But as you described, and you've done it a number of times here, Scoops at Danny Mac, there are reasons for it. Nobody's going to get into it and rip this guy publicly. So let's move on. But I know, we get text. In fact, we got a text prior to you having a chance to explain and say, hey, you're saying the opposite of what all the Shildt reports are. Would you like to, give us a little more on where or what you know? And you just kind of put it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually done that quite a few times. I haven't changed at all in terms of my knowledge of this and my interpretation of this, and it's not as this far out thing as it's being depicted, and you can't, the manager does not run the entire baseball operation. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way anywhere. People act like this is the only place in baseball that, where this is the case. It's like, come on, it's just don't be silly.
We had a conversation earlier in the day, and I said, this proves what you just said, proves a point here, and I didn't realize it until last year, the playoffs. And I remember this, and you'll remember this, Bernie. Remember Dave Roberts when he kept getting asked, well, why is this guy starting? Or why are you doing this? And he said, well, the organization, we had a meeting, and that's what came up. That's what the decision was made. That's why so-and-so is starting. I don't remember the specific picture.
That's exactly right.
But it was like, oh, so you're not making the calls all by yourself. And let's face it, if you're going to pick one of the organizations in the game of baseball today, Bernie, where you go, boy, they're really good and they really know what they're doing and they're all on the same, well, it's the Dodgers. And you just find out he's not making every decision like you think the old school managers used to make.
And I know and the Dodgers have a big payroll and all that. I get it, but they won over 100 games. I don't know how many years in a row that's happened, and it's because that brilliant front office led by Andrew Friedman, who was the guy that turned the extremely low payroll Tampa Bay Rays into a really good franchise that won a lot more than they should have. He's got his beliefs, and they've been reaffirmed many times that it's the right way to go. Mm-hmm. Mistakes are made, yeah. Trevor Bauer, yeah. I'm not saying he's flawless.
Oh yeah.
But you look at the overall body of work, and it's just obvious. Okay, so what? So Andrew Friedman, what? So he's a screwball because the Dodgers spend a small fortune on having an analytics department, and they come up with all these inside edge things that'll help the manager, and they're supposed to, not present it with him and then say, we really feel strongly you should do this. A guy like Dave Roberts is really smart because he puts his ego aside and understands that these people are only trying to help him, and they're giving him great information. And once I saw another interview about this one time where he says, and once you just kind of put your ego aside and realize it's nothing personal, you're like, well, okay, man, they're trying to help me. Let's go. And, it's not like Roberts was forced to do everything he didn't want to do. That wasn't it. See, people always want to take this stuff to an extreme. I don't know why. The guy in Tampa Bay made a mistake one time, with pulling Snell from a playoff game too soon. And then, of course, all the old school dinosaurs, it's like, see all this stuff, what a joke. No, he made a bad decision. What about all the great decisions he made with the help of their front office who gave him valuable information that gave him an edge tactically in the matchups? You think Tampa Bay is going to get to an American League Championship Series or the World Series with Kevin Cash screwing things up all the time? No. He's a hell of a manager, but he's got a lot of help from the front office because they work as a team. They work as a partnership. He's going to make a bad move sometimes. The Snell thing was a bad move, but it's not like the front office was like calling down to the dugout telling him to do it. So, Mozeliak and DeWitt truly want to have teamwork, coordination between themselves and the manager, not so much themselves as in DeWitt getting involved and like telling them what to do. I'm talking about we have a really good staff. We have like kind of rebuilt our analytics department. They're doing some really good things. It's very helpful. We believe that it can make a difference, and so we just have to expand our thinking. I, for one, I'm very appreciative of that. One of Shilt's problem is he was going the other way. The irony, of course, is when one of the reasons they gave him the job is because Matheny was never going to change and was actually digging in on some of his old school stupidity, and that's what it was. And by the way, Mike Matheny is now completely different in that regard. He gets it now. So they thought Shildt, and Shildt, was like, oh, I'm all on board with this stuff. And I know I wrote about it, talked about it a lot. This would be good for the Cardinals. And it was to a point. But then, again, this is where, and it happens with all of them, just about all of them, and this is not an attack on Mike Shildt. But then, they have some success, some of them, and it's just like their head starts to expand a little bit. And they know better than everyone else. And I'm not going to be told what to do. And, And it's the wrong way to look at it, man. If you've got really smart, innovative people, and by the way, for the people that hate Mo, I'm talking about people that work under Mo. I'm talking about all the analytics department and all the information they come up with and stuff that they can point to that can help a manager make a more informed decision that's going to increase his team's chances of winning. I'm talking about those people.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you want help? Why do you think you got to be the hero or something? I just don't get it. So they thought Shildt was going to be more open-minded and forward-thinking than he was. He was forward-thinking in some ways, but then it stopped, and then he started to go, old school. He wanted to take them back, and they weren't. Look, man, they weren't going to accept that, nor should they have accepted that. And one guy I feel bad for is Oli Marmol, because he's like walking in there, after all this. And I hope Cardinals fans are fair to him, because there's been pockets of Cardinals fans who are already unfair to him. Oh, he's nothing more than a puppet. And I think this just reflects this it's 1967 forever mindset we have in our town sometimes. Instead of viewing a collaborative effort between the manager and the analytics people for the greater good of the team in terms of tactics and getting an edge, instead of looking at that as a healthy thing, it's if a manager accepts some of the things that they're presenting to him and is really excited about trying to do things a different way. Somehow that makes him a puppet. That's really damn stupid. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. That's really damn stupid. So, I personally would like to have a manager who's got an open mind and is going to take advantage of some of the things that people are working really hard to give him. Doesn't make him a puppet, makes him a smart guy where I sit. So I hope he gets a fair shake. I worry about that a little bit because I think he deserves to have a fair shake. I think he's a pretty smart guy. But he's got a lot of things to prove himself, This thing's fascinating. And Marmol's one of the most fascinating parts of it. I know the players love him. I know his fellow coaches love him. I know he treats everyone with respect, but yet he's firm. He's also very straightforward in what he says publicly. So I don't think it's a situation where you're going to have, a lot of phony baloney stuff. I think, with Marmol, it would be a mistake to assume things because he doesn't holler and, he isn't crass and he doesn't curse or, any of that or put on a show for cameras. That stuff, players can smell that stuff for 100 miles away. They don't fall for that. All right. What else we got?
I got a text question for you from the texter here. It kind of goes with Marmol and making decisions. The text question says, hey, this is Bernie. Tommy Edmonds only had one walk this spring. Is he going to be the new version of Carpenter where he plays regardless?
It's too soon to tell. I think he's going to play a lot as he should, but to me, it's whether it's going to be as frequently in the leadoff spot as it's been. And by the way, and this is honestly, sincerely, this is not a shot at at the person who wrote the text message. I'm not taking a swipe here, but don't pay too much attention. In fact, I wouldn't pay attention at all to spring training stats. The real stuff's going to be here starting a week from now, right?
That is true.
It's going to be, they're going to be in the middle of a ball game at Busch Stadium. I wouldn't. Yeah, don't get me wrong. You look at, You look at Edman and you see 050 or whatever it is, and you're like, man, that's a little surprising. But that's all. That to me, that's where it begins and ends. That's a little surprising. Paul DeJong is on the other end of the spectrum, and listen, he's had a really confident spring. But I don't look at the numbers and say, oh, see, this just proves. No, it doesn't prove anything because it's not real. I'd rather a guy in his situation, though. I can't sit here and say, well, that's not a good thing for him, because more than anything, he's got to probably rebuild his confidence. He also needed some reinforcement that all the things that he worked on really, really hard this past off season, that he's seeing some results, even if they're in spring training. So you can take a look at that and say, well, that's good. He's building on something. Okay, now let's see what happens when they play real baseball. I mean, that's how I look at spring training stats for the most part. What do you mean by the most part? Well, if there's some old pitcher in some camp who just, all he does is throw like home run balls and give up line drive. Well, it's time to go. You can look at it that way and say, no, he doesn't have it anymore. But most players, the spring training stuff's meaningless as far as the numbers.
It's as far as that goes. I mean, you and I can go through players where you go, oh, they had a great spring, and you never heard from them again.
Can I give you one?
Yeah, please do. This is memory lane stuff. I like this.
I get burned. I say I'm not going to do this anymore, and I do it a little bit, and I get burned. But I got no problem admitting it. Who was pumping the tires last year of Justin Williams?
Yeah.
Your boy right here was. I thought he was ready. He was not.
The Cardinals told us he was ready too, remember?
Yeah, because he really did some good things in the spring, right?
Yep.
But man, it's a different world once they start playing for real.
Oh, it's no doubt. I mean, I'll go back years, like Jim Lindemann led the league or the spring training team in home runs, and they thought he was going to be the next great bat. And no, not so much. Nick Stavanoa is one of those guys. Oh, this guy can hit. You see, he's tearing it up. Brian Barton had a great 2 weeks, and he was going to be the next great one, and no, never made it even out of spring. So you can't really buy into everything you're seeing down there.
I'm trying to think. There was another situation similar to this. And Jim, you have the misfortune of having to listen to me holler every day, so thank you for that.
Okay, what are we hollering about?
But anyway, it was driving me crazy last spring.
Yes.
When our local newspaper was going bananas because,
I remember.
Edmundo Sosa was like 1 for 15 or 1 for 14 or something, but he didn't have any options left. So if they're going to set him down, they probably would have lost him. And they had spent years developing this guy. And in 2019, which was the last time that anybody played baseball in the minor leagues, he had a really good year. So he was on the cusp of actually doing some really good things. But because he gets off to an 0 for 12 start, I mean, you had people saying, "Well, you got to keep Max Moroff. He hit a home run."
Oh, yes.
Jose Rondon. This man, you got to keep. He just hit a home run, and they just wanted to throw. They just wanted to throw Sosa into the Atlantic Ocean because of like 12 at-bats in spring training. I mean, people just need to calm down about this stuff. And you know what? So does the big guy here, because I still do it sometime.
Oh, we all do. It's part of the fun. But you're right. When you just said 12 at-bats. 12 at-bats is 3 days, people. 3 days.
So you're going to relinquish your rights to him and just let any team have him? I mean, the dude, if nothing else, is a hell of a fielder. And as we saw, there's some offense in that bat, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, it's tough not to overreact. Do you remember, and if Cardinals fans are listening, I hope that some of you remember this name. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. But because when I say I hope a few people remember him, because those are the fun type of things when you just remember this figure from the past who had like his 10 minutes of fame or whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The Cardinals, I was down in spring training. This was when they were still in St. Petersburg. I was me and Hummel, and they had a big right-hander, right? A reliever. His name was, people look him up on Baseball Reference. His name was Howard Hilton. And he had a really good spring. I mean, he's pounding it. He's striking people out. And, I'm just randomly making something up here, but teams had were like 1 for 19 against them in spring training or something. And it looked like he was going to make the team in the bullpen, Howard Hilton. And the thing of it is because I think they had some injuries, so there was an opening. And as it turned out, he did make the team. And I actually thought it was really funny because he was a big hawking dude, and he was kind of a character, and I thought it was kind of fun. He was going to be like a cult figure, Howard Hilton.
Yeah.
Even the name, here he comes from the bullpen, the big boy, Howard Hilton. And you're like, wow, this is a character. So I remember going to, I can't do a Whitey impersonation. I remember going to Whitey's office when they had set the roster, and I'm like, hey, the big boy, huh? It's pretty exciting. And he says, let me tell you something. He said, don't bleep and get too excited about Howard bleeping Hilton. He ain't going to be here long. We needed a guy. He ain't going to be here long. Don't get too excited. I'm just looking out for you. Don't be writing any BS about this guy. He ain't going to be here. He going to get a cup of coffee, and then he's out of here. And I just started laughing, and Whitey started giggling because it's true. That happens in baseball so many times, right?
Yep.
You look at a guy, and you're like, oh, man, he's really good. He made the team. Nobody predicted this. And the manager's like, look, let me tell you something. Don't make a fool of yourself. This guy ain't going to be here long. We needed a guy just to get started in the season. Because whoever it was, he's going to be back in 5 days or whatever, And that's how it played out. Howard Hilton, he did get in the show. He did get into a game or two, but that was it. And
6'3", 230 is listed at big man.
And I think that was a little. I think it was a little light on the estimation there.
Oh goodness!
I know. And I was really sad, by the way, when he passed away too, because he was a character. He was a good dude, and he was one of these instant spring training legends.
Yeah, those are the best. Oh my goodness.